Hello, everyone. This is a very, very special occasion. We have an extraordinary panel discussing the role of women in Sudan. I'd like to extend that topic a little bit further. I want to say that gender equality is not just a Sudanese issue, but a global issue. Women have, as you know, always been in the forefront lines as advocates, protesters, as leaders of civil society organizations, mediators, negotiators, and making things happen. Very often, I think women are portrayed as victims, and very often that is the case. But it is the positive side that we also need to emphasize to make it understood that women have a large, more than a 50% percentage role to play. And we cannot afford, I'm going to be the advocate, we cannot afford to say that is enough. So we at the Center for Global Affairs, which I'm proud to say I helped to found in 2004, we do that in a variety of ways, and I want to bring it back to us, to our home. So Dr. Sylvia Mayer, who's Sylvia to me and I'm Vera to her, has been the chief honcho of the gender concentration. But gender appears in 7 other concentrations, okay? In transnational security, in international law and human rights, in every way, in environmental issues, obviously, and in specializations on risk and on the United Nations. It is nowhere is it absent, okay? And we do that through graduate programs, through continuing education programs, through experiential practicums and scenarios. And I think our message and our type of education, which has had variations over these past years since 2004, is always motivated by those principles. So I am more than just delighted to have this discussion today and to place it in the context of Sudan, which obviously is very important, but also into the global context. So I welcome all of you, and I now pass the baton to my colleague and wonderful friend, Dr. Sylvia Mayer.
Thank you so much, Vera, Dean Jelinek, for these wonderful, warm words of welcome and for setting the stage, the global stage for our conversation. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you now the moderator of this wonderful panel, Ms. Wala Ali. Wala is originally from Khartoum in Sudan. She is a civil society activist with 9 years of experience in the fields of youth empowerment, public policy, and gender activism. Wala is a lawyer by training, so she has a degree in law as well as a master's degree in gender and peace studies. Wala worked with youth and women's groups all over the country of Sudan and aims to work on research and knowledge production to create more effective interventions. This year, Wala is a Fulbright scholar here at NYU Center for Global Affairs, and I have the great honor and pleasure to be working with her on her research project. As we see all around the world, as we see currently in Ukraine, we see it in Argentina, we see it all around the world, women are playing a crucial, indeed essential role in the struggle for human rights. There can be no peace or prosperity or sustainable development without women. Wala, please take it from here.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, for the lovely introduction. I'm very lucky to be a part of the CGA family, and thank you. Hi and welcome to everyone who is joining us today. And today we are joined by by our lovely panelists who are activists and leaders in Sudan. And today we are talking about Sudan, a country that has been witnessing a lot of changes since the December 2018 revolution, a revolution that ended 30 years of dictatorship in Sudan. And the struggle to overthrow a dictator is not easy, obviously, but as it takes 6 months of persistent protests from Sudanese youth, from Sudanese women, and from all the categories of the community. The activism in the end ended by an agreement between the military and the forces of freedom and change. That was in 2019, in July 2019. So I will give a brief introduction about the situation and the story that happened in Sudan, and then our panelists can give more details about the current situation in Sudan. This agreement, the agreement between the military and the forces of freedom and change, brought upon a period, the transitional period in Sudan. And the struggle for that agreement to be substantial for bringing democracy in Sudan was not easy. And it was more obvious when it came to women's rights in that period. Between the women's rights activists, the supporters of women's rights, and the non-supporters of women's rights, there was a lot of conflict, there was a lot of movement, there was a lot of compromises to be made. The transitional government tried to work within the limits of within the limitations of the disagreements between the military and the civilian government, and it it ended in some achievements, but not all the achievements of women who were participating, protesting, and organizing for the change in Sudan. And the achievement could be summarized in the cancellation of the public order law, also the criminalization of FGM, and the ratification of the Convention of Elimination of All Sorts of Discrimination Against Women, but with 3 major reservations over 3 articles that were very important. So many women, many activists in Sudan who have been participating and have been protesting and have been wishing for a greater change regarded the efforts from the transitional governments to be shallow, to be disappointing, to be elitist, and they generally don't meet Sudanese women's expectations after the revolution. Another major setback happened in October 25th, 2021, where a coup took place led by the military general Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and which brought the whole transitional period to a stop. And since then, people of Sudan have been protesting this coup, and these protests have actually resulted in more than 90 casualties. More than 90 people were killed during the protests against this coup, and also more cases of rape and violence against women are being reported within each protest. The latest took place in the March 14th protest, where reportedly 3 girls were raped by official forces. And the aggression towards women started from the transitional period. And some may say that it's because of the overwhelming participation of women, but also others will attribute it to the economic situation that is very unstable, and even more unstable after the coup. The international community efforts at the moment are pushing for negotiations between parties in Sudan. But the general mass, the people who are in the street, they are asking, including women, they're asking, they're working under the slogan of no partnership, no negotiation, and no legitimacy for the coup. And they are asking for the criminalization of this coup and the people who are behind it. And the international media at the moment is very lacking in accessibility and in information about what is happening in Sudan. And the situation is deteriorating in every second. The security situation, the human rights conditions as well. And today we are joined by a group of Sudanese leaders and activists, leaders in academia, leaders in international community, and leaders in activism in Sudan. We are joined by Professor Bakri al-Madani, who's an associate professor at the University of Long Island. We're also joined by ENAS MUZAMEL, who is a civil society activist and the founder of the Women Cyclist Initiatives and the co-founder of MADANIYA organization. Also, we are joined by Marina Neil, who is a social and political activist and the director of Afia community. Also, HANADI, ABDELHALIM, who is a civil society activist who worked in many international organizations. You can find out more about our speakers in the chat box. As well as our schedule for today is going to be very short and tight in schedule, where we're gonna go through a round of discussion from our respected speakers, and then we'll open the floor for Q&As through our chat box. And now we will be going to Professor Bakri, who's going to give us a little bit of details about the situation, the current situation in Sudan. Hello, Professor Bakri.
Let me start by thank you, Ella. I would like to thank Dean VERA, Dr. Sylvia and the Center for Global Affairs for having me. I feel so honored to actually be among such an outstanding group of women from Sudan, from NYU, from the It's March, the Women Month, and we celebrate women achievement, and I really feel honored to be here. For the sake of time, I don't know how much time do I have. I know you have a very tight schedule, so I'm going to try to really get a few things across. Because I don't know your audience and how far they are familiar with Sudan, let me try to give a little bit of a background for people who might really not know much about Sudan. So I'm going to speak to three things. The nature of the state. The Sudanese state, as we witness it at the moment, is not a random thing. It's an emergence of deep history. I could go back and link it to what I usually call it the 1821s. That's the time when the Ottoman Muhammad Ali Pasha's forces took over Sudan. This is the modern state in Sudan we have now is really at the beginning of it. And one thing, it's based on rent-seeking, extractive economic activity that is always has been after gold and quick gathering of resources. So that's one piece of information that I really need to get out there. Of course, like any other African countries or Asian countries, the post-colonial state in Sudan, starting from 1956, really started lacking any national agenda in a way that it will reflect or it would represent all Sudanese citizens. That eventually led to beginning of civil wars. It started even before Sudan fully independent in 1955. Civil war lasted for a while, and we are still in civil war for that reason. Excuse me. Just another point that I have to put across before I talk about what's going on now, because what's going on now is really not isolated. It has a lot to do with what has been going on in Sudan. Post-colonial state failed to represent Sudanese people, dragged the country into civil wars, and eventually South Sudan became an independent state in 2010. 2011, I must say, after a peace agreement signed in 2005. We have to keep in mind another thing, another fact about Sudan. Out of those 66 years since Sudan has been an independent country, about 55 years have been ruled by military. Unfortunately, unlike so many other African countries or even Latin American countries, military in Sudan has never been a professional unit that is ruling on its own. It has always been politicized. So the first coup we have in 1958 was not isolated. It was the political parties who actually went to the military asking them to take over the state, take over government. And that was 1958. It lasted until 1964. People took to the street. We have a revolution. We brought back democracy for 5 years. And then the communists decided to take over the state through military. And that's also, again, yes, of course, during 1970s, Numeri was the engineer, was the head of the coup in 1969, completely ran away from all the political parties, and he actually slaughtered the communists, but he tried to run a country as a professional military dictatorship. Of course, it failed. In 1985, we had another revolution and people brought back democracy, went to votes. And in 1989, the Islamists took over the state again through military coup. What I was about to say, Sudanese military has always been involved and engaged in running the state for about 55 years of its existence. I'm talking about since independence. So why is that relevant? Because we can't really talk about what's happening now in Sudan without understanding the presence and control of the military of the state is a long process of emerging, being part of the economy and politics. So as we speak, I have to say, the Sudanese state is completely hijacked. We have what we call the Sudanese armed forces. Yes, they do have, they function as a facade to use the state as, to legitimize their existence socially and politically. But as a matter of fact, they really function outside the state. As we speak, based on some reports that came out recently between the military, and I will talk a little bit about Rapid Support Forces, which is a militia in a bit, they control about 10 billion size of Sudanese economy that is not even part of the state. So if you have the military that is functioning as parallel state to the state with an economic system completely independent from the state, not even audited by any government body, then I think we know the structural issue we are dealing with. So the military is not just part of running the state; it is a state within the state. And that is really a structural issue. And that is really the crux of the matter as Wala succinctly and beautifully laid out the issue. Hijacked state controlled by the military. And of course, I have to say the 30 years of Islamists who we have to say something to the fact that they really don't believe in the nation state. They tried to completely weaken, and we call it the hollowing of the state. They created institutions that are not part of the state. And now when we have to get rid of Bashir, all of a sudden we found out the state machinery is an empty vessel. It really doesn't have much to do with the state. That situation now we are facing with because we have the military and other militia groups completely dominating politics, completely controlling the economy, and we have Sudanese people in the streets really trying to regain control of their lives. So in a nutshell, to answer the question, what's happening in Sudan now, I would say Sudanese people are trying to really, this is an existential dilemma, and I have been in Sudan recently, and I'm sure my colleagues and friends in Sudan would agree. This is a matter of life and death. Sudanese people are trying to regain control of their destiny. They're trying to claim their lives. And this is happening in the face of a hijacked state used by militias and armed forces that claim to be the Sudanese armed forces, but really they are not working for any of Sudanese people. We have to keep in mind there are some regional players in the game. Sudan at this point is a very weakened, fragile state, and they are, I'm not going to get into regional issues, but we have to point out. And the middle, Sudan is actually right now in the middle of tug of war between Ethiopia and Egypt. Ethiopia is building a new dam, which is going to affect the flow of water to Egypt. Egypt is trying to get Sudan to take side against Ethiopia. At the same time, we have regional players in the area. UAE are interested in some of Sudan's resources, Saudi Arabia as well. And I have to add to that, to complete the whole thing, Russia is a major player in Sudan as we speak. So I will close by saying there are 3,500 Wagner Group mercenaries in Sudan right now. They are providing information, intelligence, they are flying drones, they are flying helicopters, and they are putting their hand on Sudanese gold. So Sudanese people are not really fighting against the military. They are fighting against lots of odds, and that's what makes things so complicated. But I think people are confident and they really convinced that they have a judge case. And I think I should stop right here. Maybe I will take more in the questions. Thank you for the question, Wala.
Thank you, Professor Bekri. Thank you so much for this. I know it's very hard to summarize everything that is happening in Sudan in such a in such a small, time, in such a short time. But sorry for that. Now we can go to ENAS, who's going to give us more details about women activism within the current situation in Sudan. How did they participate in before the coup and maybe now after the coup, as we are hearing a lot of disturbing news about what is going on in Sudan. Could you go ahead, Enas?
Yeah, thank you, Wala. And yeah, I will just start like what Bakri said, that we need to know some history about that the women movement in Sudan, and the history of the strong movement in Sudan started even in 1952 when the formation of the women union. The Women's Union by a group of communist ladies. And since that time, the women were always, Sudanese women were always part of all, social, political, and, all the struggles, all the change in Sudan. The context in Sudan, of course, is very patriarchal society and very strict and traditional when it comes to women. And that was always the case. And recently, the revolution, as I think the whole world was noticing that the women were in the front line in 2018 revolution, and they were really in terms of number and also in terms of the organization, the contribution of women was really big. But when it came to the structures of the transitional government, as many of you know, it was a big disappointment that we kept, struggling and fighting to get into decision-making positions in Sudan, in the transitional government, structures, ministries, and whatever. And women are very organized, and even the icon of the Sudanese revolution was Ala Salah, with this picture that was very famous everywhere in the world. And even now, after what happened in this very unfortunate situation after 25th of October, women were struggling on the street, asking, calling for going back to the democratic track of the country, to go back to the democratic track. And women kept marching, protesting, and just recently, the 8th of March, which the International Women's Day, was the big march in Sudan for women, and also very unique and actions what we call it in Arabic, like "Khushi al-Lajna," and join the committee, is an action, and also a movement by young ladies, and they're still calling for women to be part of resistance committees, to be part of all structures in the at the formal and informal level. Women, we always analyze the situation of women in Sudan by this triangle, where there is the customs, the traditions, and also there is the laws and the legislations, and also the religion, and all those things that are the main obstacles for women to effectively and actively participate in political, social life in Sudan. Yeah, that is just like an overview of what's going on. with the women movement in Sudan.
Thank you, ENAS. Could you highlight more on the activism that currently is being conducted by women, whether they are in the civil society organizations or maybe even in the committees?
Yeah, the activism in Sudan is we have the civil society organization. We have women in political parties in Sudan, although it's one of the challenges that women do exist in political bodies in Sudan, but they do not exist in the, they are not in the decision-making positions, and that also weakening their position when it comes to the participation and to the representation. Like what we have so far is representation, but not participation. In civil society, I think the strongest organization right now in Sudan are the women-led organization in the Sudanese civil society. They're really the most active ones, are the ones that are led by women. And we have also like a new movement inside universities like Niswa group, those feminists inside Khartoum University, Milan University. I'm doing some work with them, and I can see that we are having new generations of the feminism and also activism at a very important level, which is the student and the young people. We also have the ladies now in the front line in the revolution, and we see the Ghadibun and the kings of fights in the revolution, and we see those ladies, and of course the government and the current government, which is the military, are using the gender-based violence, the sexual violence as a tool and as a weapon to to break the women and to discourage them from going out, and all those rumors about the women who are participating in the protest. They will be they will face some sexual harassment or sexual abuse, and also it's one of the big jobs that the women movement in Sudan are working on and they are doing now. It's to correct those information, especially that we are living in a very traditional society in Sudan. So at all levels there is an activism.
Thank you, ENAS. Thank you. Now we will go to Marine, who is going to give us more details about women mobilization efforts, how women are organizing themselves and also organizing protests, organizing participation within themselves. You can go, Marine.
Thank you, Ella, and thank you to the Center of Global Affairs for shedding light on what's happening right now. I think for me to be able to say a little bit more about what's happening with the women's role in the revolution, the Sudanese revolution, it would shed some light if I draw some comparisons between what is happening when it comes to women's activism and just the general activism during this wave, and I mean the wave that is started after the 2021 coup. A general theme that we've seen in the movement after the coup is that there's been an exposing pseudo gains, and maybe the biggest one to kind of highlight.
Marine? Seems like Marine has some technical difficulties. Can everyone hear or see Marine anywhere?
I think she's frozen, so probably might want to go to Hanadi and then you can back.
Yes. So meanwhile, Hanadi may be able to shed some light on the current efforts that are going on from the international community when it comes to solidarity towards women. Hanadi, are you with us?
Yes, I'm hoping that you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. There have been a connection issue. I think all of us got affected, so that's why the previous speaker jumped out. I was hoping that by now maybe the previous speakers have built a bit of foundation of what women specifically role during the current situation. So I go in further. But with the issues that happened with the previous speaker, I think I will go back a bit and then, just highlight what is happening and what's we are trying to support with. So in terms of political participation efforts, there have been a bit of discussion for the keynote speakers before me, highlighting that there is a number of initiatives that is currently been led by different actors, whether they are from the international community part or nationally. Some of the political collisions and political actors are trying to build a political process that can people agree on something and move forward. And of course, with the stand of the youth and the resistant communities, things are not moving very strongly, and we have a scattered and efforts. And I think that relates to the fragility and also the fragmentation, whether in the political actors or the civil society structures. So the fragmentation and the fragility may lead to why people are not making it, why the civilians forces, and I'm not saying, I'm not only looking at the FFC, I'm looking at the broader space, why they have not been able to move something. And of course, the fragmentation is not a result of today, but as Dr. Bakri highlighted, Sudan history was never a good environment for strong democratic or a state where we can say a state building process we're undergoing, and a state was strongly established. Maybe that's some of the reason behind that. And the many initiatives that are happening, we can name the initiative led by the UNITAMS. UNITAMS is the United Nations mission to Sudan that supports a political transition and also looking at the peace building. UNITAMS is leading a negotiation currently, and then although this initiative is rejected by a lot of political actors and bodies, we are still trying to position women to be an active participant in such initiatives. And we are also looking at how women can effectively influence such processes. So ensuring that women are at the heart of the table of all the initiatives that are held, not only the UNITAMS initiative. And a lot of the different political groups have developed political documents or in the process of developing a political documents, like the resistant committees or some of the political parties. And what we are trying to do is ensuring that these political documents are engendered from the beginning. Women at the heart and the center of engendering such documents, and looking at how women can be engaged in an active way, not including verses about women once the thing is done, no, but ensuring that women are leading, participating, and including and sitting in the table. And we are also looking at how women will drive these documents, not only inputting in it, but also to lead the negotiations following such documents. And we know that there is a lot of documents, and we have some documents and initiatives that are led by women, which we work very hard to strengthen these initiatives. Because as you know, women's role can be as big as that they can be the actors who bring everything together and reach the political stabilization in Sudan. this is not something that is so far away. Women in Sudan specifically have a great history of leading quite big initiatives when it comes to peace building or political stability. So why not? Now we are looking at how women, promoting women leadership and participation politically, not only to influence the processes and to get involved in the processes, but also to be actively agent of change or how to lead such processes. Of course, with all the technical levels of looking how they will be engaged in these documents, the possibility of one of these documents becoming a constitution. So we ensure that women are rights, needs, and demands are reflected. I hope that everyone is with me because I felt like, can I take just a few more minutes or should I stop now?
No, Hanadi, go on. You still have some time left. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, so we are women groups and women movements, as the previous panelists have mentioned. We have a lot of groups and a lot of initiatives that women are very strongly active in civil society organizations. So they have been successfully able to come up with a common agenda for women and their needs and demands when it comes to political participation or economic reforms, or even the security sector reforms. So what we are looking at is we are trying to unify different efforts of women leaders when it comes to civil society or women movement to have a unified vision. So they are in a stronger position to be able to influence whatever political process is ongoing or leading a new political initiative for political stability. We are also looking at the promotion. We are at this is at what we are doing at a macro level. Maybe also international community is looking at how the women can be engaged more in the political processes and how their roles can be more effective, and looking at education and capacity building to women at grassroots levels to be more effectively engaged in whatever political process comes up, or to be effectively engaged into building coalitions and building and organizing themselves into movements or organizations. So they will be able to influence and lead the transitional context or the current context. I don't even know what to call the current context, on how women can have a more influential role. Well, okay, and I'm also, the engagement is at 2 levels. A level that focuses on the leadership and participation of women, and another that looks at how we can make sure that women are leading and participating in the already existing initiatives that are currently going on. At the level of protection, the country and the international community is working on monitoring the violations that are currently going in the protest. And also they are looking at monitoring whatever, not specifically have a specific working group looking at violations against women during this current period. Also that we are, the international community is looking at the protection of civilian, and I think this is a big agenda for the UNCT and UNITAMS to look at how strategically you can implement a protection of civilian in such context, because you know that the government is missing. There is no government, and this is a coup status, and even the protectors have international sanctions on them. So how would you be able to provide protection of civilians in such context? This is one of the highest discussions at the highest levels, and of course protection of women and girls at the heart of everything. Lastly, women themselves, we have women movement organizations are working on the monitoring the situation and the violations and provision of services. When it comes to provision of services to survivors, there is a lot of initiatives that are now taking place, and I don't think we have the time to go through all of them. But in a nutshell, maybe that's what we are, what the international community in general, not only my agency, are doing currently to improve the situation. There is a lot of initiative also under the economic situation on the micro and the meso level, because of course of the absence of the macroeconomic changes because of the current situation. So I can't go any further. So thank you very much for the time, and I'm open for those questions, any questions.
Thank you, Hanadi. Thank you for the summarization of everything that is happening. We are currently are open for Q&As, but before we do that, we'll go to Marine and Neil, who's going to shed light on the activism of women and the mobilization, focusing on grassroots mobilization efforts, and also the question of the resistance committees. What are they? How do they work? And women involvement within them.
Thank you. Sorry, internet's quite a challenge here in Sudan. So yes, picking up at where I stopped, I think there's a general theme in this current wave of resistance about exposing the pseudo gains. I think the 2019 constitutional charter was a pseudo gain. It was not our aim to just change Omar al-Bashir, but to change the entire regime. And signing a declaration with his security committee is really not what the revolution was seeking. And I think we're seeing that now, that people are, we're very aware of these pseudo gains, and we're very cautious about not falling again into one of them. And I think that's what the 3 no's mean: no negotiation, no legitimacy, no, sorry, help me out here. No legitimacy,
no partnership.
No partnership, thank you. This is not only talking about the coup, but the military authority. Like Dr. Bakri said, Sudan has mostly been ruled by the military since its independence. So what we've seen, like to focus specifically on women's movement, like the other panelists have said, on the ground, we're seeing a lot of women protesters actively participating. And then during that transitional government, we've not seen women representation in the government. So I think that was also part of a pseudo gain, right? We got the headlines, but none of the decision making, right? And we've had like 3 cabinets, I think, during the transitional government. The best one of them had 10% representation of women. That fell really short from the 40% that people have demanded, which was already kind of a compromise, right? So what we've seen during that transitional government reign, women's movements and activism and women's groups grew to be more organized, more accessible to women of different backgrounds, and more influential, I must say. We've seen the first Women's March took place during the 2019 events, and then it happened every year up until 2022 during this year's Women's Day. And I'm going to highlight some of the events of the Women's March just to demonstrate the double struggle for women during the Sudanese revolution. So what happened on the Women's March is that many grassroots women's groups called for calling this march, as we have some scheduled what we call a Millions March or a Miliyoniya. So some women's group asked for this Miliyoniya to be called the Feminist Miliyoniya, or the Feminist Millions March. And many resistance committees said that would be divisive and refused to call it the Feminist March. And it ended up being a small, relatively smaller group of protesters, mostly women, marching towards the Union for Street Vendors, which is mostly women, tea and food vendors. So here we're also seeing like this intersection between also gender and class, right? So this was the group that, one of the groups that demanded it being called the Feminist March, and the resistance committees literally marched the other ways, and many of the protesters marched towards the union are part of resistance committees. But we are not only fighting we're not only saying no legitimacy, no partnership, no negotiation with the military authority, but we're also saying that to these patriarchal values that remain within our revolutionary bodies, unfortunately. And I think I'll keep it at that and maybe jump again at the Q&A. Thank you, Ella.
Thank you, Merin, for shedding light on the events that are taking place and of course, the climate that women has to go through to fight for their rights in a society like ours in Sudan. We have some Q&As coming in, and the first one I think can go to HANADI, which is asking about women from Ethiopia, how they can give support to Sudanese women. Like, how about women's solidarity? How can women from different parts of the world be a part of this struggle and show up for Sudanese women? Hanadi, can you hear us?
Yes. Okay. This is a great question. Solidarity for women movement and the feminist movement in general is something historically known, and I think that Ethiopian women know the struggles of Sudanese women, and as I mentioned, there is a lot of initiatives that are led, not a lot, I think a few initiatives, let's be a bit modest, that are led by women, political initiatives. It's led by academic women and women activists that are well known. So I think the call for the work of the women movement in general and civil society, maybe we are lacking this part of the regional connection and how we can strengthen our coalitions and strengthen our movement and demands by having these regional and international relations to be able to effectively advocate for our cause. And so I think that just gathering hands into the initiatives that which are led by women and advocating at the international level and having this collision of women solidarity and standing with the women who are leading such initiatives will of course give the initiative or whatever that we are advocating for a stronger length and an international length that can put a little bit of a pressure on the government or the military regime that is now governing. So that may be in a nutshell what we can do.
Thank you very much, Hanadi. Merin, do you have to add to this one?
I'd like to say that I encourage mostly, grassroots to grassroots solidarity. I think that brings a lot of benefits. And one of examples that I can think of that are specific to Ethiopian activists, currently and for decades, migrants and especially women who have been trying to cross from Ethiopia to Sudan are subjected to a lot of violence and also specifically sexual violence. And I think this is an issue that women from Ethiopia and Sudan can collaborate to work on. This is only one example, but in general, I think the different groups from different countries or regions were able to find common interests that we can collaborate on genuinely and in a way that can show us, kind of a direct impact that we see on the ground.
Thank you, Merin, so much. We have another question, and I do believe that maybe Professor Bakri can answer this one, which is like the diaspora role. The diaspora role can promote transitional justice aimed due to constant digital repression in Sudan. Like, how is that affecting the the diaspora's role in the current situation in Sudan? And how can diaspora in general and women diaspora contribute to the future accountability process or political documents beyond solidarity?
Thank you. I think it's from Rinas, if I may say. Yeah, Rinas. Thank you, Rinas, for the question. I think there are lots of things women in the diaspora could do, and also men could do, and I think some of them are really doing it. It's some of these efforts could be around gathering evidence. Some of these efforts could be around trying to understand the complexities of these issues and try to create space, venues for people actually to even come. I think one thing that I need to say, the concept of transitional justice seems to be misunderstood. Sometimes people think of transitional justice as if, it's like truth and reconciliation, that's part of it. But transitional justice also includes procedural justice, i.e. people who actually commit crimes, they need to held accountable. I think in the international law, and I've been involved, I'm not going to say much, with some of the cases of the recent rape in Khartoum of the victims. And I think one of the things we are doing is trying to create access to ways for women to find, even bring those perpetrators to justice outside Sudan, given that in Sudan right now, there is no legal system that you could hold anyone accountable as far as they know. The previous, rulers of the regime, Bashir and his friends, are hanging out in beautiful houses in Khartoum while they're supposed to be in prison. So I think if I have to say succinctly, it's probably having and documenting, gathering evidence, creating spaces, allowing people to actually come together and hopefully seek justice in venues where we can seek justice in these countries. I wouldn't mind even opening legal cases against some of these leaders in Sudan, in the United States, and other places, and in Europe, whenever they travel, if they plan to travel one day. But also just have the infrastructure ready for a long process. Transitional justice in Sudan is going to be it's going to be a 10, 15 years project. It's not going to be like what people think is like 2 weeks truth and reconciliation meeting. This is going to be a long, dragged on process. And we need to really have deep thinking about what need to be there for that process to even begin. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Professor Bakri. Thank you so much. And now, ENAS, could you please shed some light about the women agenda, the political and civil agenda of women, and would be if there, in a scenario that there's a new transitional government, for instance, what is the women agenda, the political and the civil women agenda?
Well, Wala, it's, we're always, shouting for their agenda, which is like, the basic, equity and equality, the issue of participation and representation, and pushing for international community in Sudan, like UN agencies, and so to play a bit of a positive role. And maybe some of you came across the photo yesterday of this meeting of UNITAM's meeting with the gender experts, and still like the international community in Sudan repeating the same mistake, which is categorizing the experts based on the elites, the older women. We have some respect, of course, for the people with experience, but we are the majority we are a young, nation, 70% of the population under 30, while you find all the people, in the decision-making positions, and half of the population, of course, are women. So you find the elites, you find the so one of the agenda also, this like the women agenda, like Sudan is very big and diverse. Women in Khartoum are not the women in Darfur, are not the women in East Sudan, and not the women in River Nile state. So a lot of local considerations, and also a bit of a fair way of planning when it comes to deciding about women, especially in their absence, and when they are, like here in Khartoum, we sit and plan for as a national agenda without really considering the local context. So those are one of the things that really wanted to shed light on, and those are the things, as long as we just keep them aside and don't solve them, we are not going to move anywhere.
Thank you very much, ENAS. I think Hanadi have an addition. Hanadi, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Mohammed, for the question. It is a really good one. I'm thinking that the women agenda, when the initiatives that we encountered during the transitional period, we had, we noted that there
Hanadi? We're having some problems hearing you. Can anybody hear Hanadi?
No.
Okay.
She might be disconnected or something.
Yeah, it's the network, so. Okay. If there are no more additions, I feel like we are very crushed by time at the moment, and we have to conclude, as Hanadi is having some technical problems with this very important question to end the discussion with. And I feel like it's a question that is going to be standing because, as Ina said, Sudan is a very white country, and women are different anywhere in it. So I feel like it's basically where we are. So the conversation need to be continued, and the conversation need to be taken seriously. And as women, we all have a role in it, and we should play it regardless of our position, and be open and accepting of all the views and of all the other opinions and situations. And with this note, we have to conclude our wonderful thank you very much for everyone who's been a part of this. Thank you, Michelle, Vera, Sylvia, for the support. Thank you for our wonderful speakers for putting this whole thing together and being able to share their opinions with us. Even though of the all of the hardships in Sudan and in other places, of course. And until we meet again, hopefully, I wish you all the best. I wish everyone in Sudan to be secure and safe, and to keep playing their wonderful roles. And until we meet again.